Good morning. Welcome to today's class. My name is Jon Witt, and this is a handstand prep class. So if you've never done any handstand work, it's a fundamental class to help build up a handstand. So you don't need a lot of equipment. I have 2 blocks. They'll be something that we'll be using, and you'll need a wall if you're going to be going up into a handstand. I don't spend a lot of time on that because if you're preparing for a handstand, you might not have the strength or the stability in the hands to get yourself up into that position. But there's many things that you can do to build upon that. So if there's an interest and a desire, I really believe anyone can do a handstand. It's just, there's things that you'll have to do to prepare yourself to eventually get it where it would be a freestanding handstand. And if that never happens and you're just using the wall, I think it's still a very good practice. If you're even just the line of working the handstand, the line drills that are great ways to help with your posture and to help restore your lower back. So how we're going to start is in an all-4 position. I'm going to do some prep work for your hands, and I'm going to also do some stuff for your feet. And I do work with mobilizing the lower body, which I think is really helpful just in general health. So when you come forward onto your hands and your knees, the hands are just underneath, say, the shoulders. And I'm going to turn my hands out a little bit more than I typically would. And you wouldn't do this in balancing for the handstand, but just kind of feel how the weight is when you're moving it forward. And you're moving the weight side to side. And by moving the weight side to side, just adds a different kind of leverage in the hands. So if you've done a lot of push-ups in your life, you can, you might not need as much prep work for the hands. Same thing if you've done a lot of yoga, maybe you don't really need as much, but it really makes a difference. I think prepping the hands is probably the most important thing in terms of, eventually, like I said, kicking up or using the wall. So I'm going to turn my hands to face in. And then as I'm turning my hands in, I'm just going to be moving the weight again side to side. And it adds just a different kind of leverage. And it's also a really good prep for the shoulders. So the more the shoulders can rotate in, the more the shoulders rotate out. So I'm not really protracting the shoulders or anything like that. I'm just more in a neutral position. So I'm going to turn the hands all the way back towards the knees. So the fingers turn back, and with the hands turning back, I'm just kind of moving the weight now back. And you don't have to try to get the heels of the hands off the floor, but it's something that would, happen for you as you go further back. So I'm just more measuring which side I actually need to stretch out more. For this particular stretch, it almost feels like I'm not doing it on my right side. That's how much I feel it on my left side. So you'll feel imbalances within the hands. So then I'm going to turn the backs of the hands to the floor. So my hands are tense here. And then I'm moving the weight back. So to stretch out more of the forearms and more of the wrist. So take the hands back where the hands are underneath the shoulders. And what you're going to do is just let the chest drop down in between the arms. And then just protract the shoulders. So protracting the shoulders is just you're moving the shoulder blades apart, which is any straight arm position on your hands. So I'm going to let the chest move down, and then I'm just going to push back, right? I'm going to do that one more time, just letting it come down, and then pushing straight back up into the top. And this push here is really key. So especially if you don't have a lot of strength in your hands, the more stability you get in your shoulders, the better the balance will be when you're on your hands. So I'm going to take it into a longer stance, and I'm going to keep that protraction in the shoulders, and I'm going to lift up into a plank and just get a little hollowed through the chest, and think of the pelvis in a posterior tilt. So if you stick your butt out, right, and you could do that, right, this is a good thing to work on, and then just move the tailbone down. Right, and then I'm just purposely being off alignment in terms of the pelvis, and then I'm gonna be in a posterior tilt, and by being in that's the line that you want to keep when you are in a straight line for your handstand. So go up into a down dog. You can pedal the legs out. As you pedal the legs out, I'm just trying to get the weight back into the heels. Say down dog is a really difficult pose for you, all the more benefits you can receive from the position. So the more difficult the pose is, the more benefits you'll get from them, right? Or exercise, right? I'm going to come forward into a plank, and then I'm going to come down onto the knees, and I'm just going to slowly, slowly lower to a 90-degree angle, just for a few seconds, and then coming all the way down. I'm going to do some cobras before I do the feet work, and then back into the hands, and then back into like some handstand work. So lift up into a low cobra, really shallow, and then as you're in a shallow cobra, pull the chest forward and try to articulate through the upper back. So if I'm, somewhat forward where with my hips and it's too much leverage, I would take the hands wider, I'd bring them more forward. It's not critical that you're up as high as anyone that's partaking in a cobra, but I'm going to come down, and as I come down, I'm going to come back into just a relaxed position. I'm going to do that one more time. I'm going to come up. Before you come up, get into the posterior tilt of the pelvis and curl up into a very low position, and then bring yourself up into something higher. When you come up, just kind of feel how the weight sits in the hips, and this will help in terms of stretching your body out more symmetrically, right? So take 3 deep breaths. It's good to hold longer when it's good. It's good to come out when things aren't really the best for yourself, because then you could always re-enter them. So there's a difference between good and bad sensations. So bring yourself down, and then as you come down, I'm going to take the hands just underneath the shoulders, and then lift the knees, lift the thighs, and then press through the hands and press straight up to the top of your push-up. So shoulders are rotating out, right? Eyes of the elbows don't have to be forward, but you're getting a good rotation in the arms, right, to help with this, which is a handstand, right? This is one of the better things to work on in terms of getting you into that handstand at the wall or in the middle of the room. So bring your knees down, and then when you bring your knees down, bring your blocks over if you have shorter arms, you just want to have them. So my toes are tucked, and then I'm going to sit back towards the heels of my feet. So when my toes are tucked, I'm in an upright position if I can, right? Not that you have to be this high up, but I'm going to come back where I'm bringing my weight into my feet. Stretch out the feet. As you stretch out the feet more, it'll be easier globally for the body. So I'm going to come back, tucking the toes, and sitting back on the heels. And this could, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but this could be a 2-minute series. It could be a 5-minute series. It could be 10 minutes, something that would help you with, deeper squatting positions. So I'm going to come back where I'm untucking the toes and then sitting back on the feet. So I'm going to bring the weight into my left foot, and then in my right, back into my left. So just, again, kind of get the weight to be a bit more balanced, and then bringing it back into the middle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tuck the toes and sit back on the heels. Now I showed that beginning type of series. You could keep using that. But if I can, I'm going to lift my knees off the floor and then lightly bring the knees down. So you get a little bit more control. And when you're doing something like this, it'll build up an awareness how to use your body a bit better. And it'll help with the skill of learning a handstand. So just one more time, I'm going to lift the knees up, and then I'm going to come up and do some squats in these types of positions. So like I said, if these positions are really difficult for you, go back to the very beginning of tucking the toes and sitting back on the feet. So I'm going to take my arms forward, just going to come a little bit off the heels of the feet. Then I'm going to lift up just a little bit lower than, say, the knees. And then I'm going to come up, and then I'm going to come down with the heels. So I'm going to do these a few times. So I'm going to take the arms forward, slowly bending the knees. So the eccentric is bringing you down. You need strength, right, for this. So I'm just above the knees, then I'm just below the knees, then I'm sitting on the heels of the feet. Now use your hands if you need to, or you could lightly bring the knees down, and then untuck the toes, sit back on the feet. Again, maybe one is all you need. I'm going to do that one more time. I'm going to tuck the toes, sitting back on the heels, lifting the knees, coming up just a bit, coming up to the height of the knees, coming all the way up, and then coming down. So I'm going to get back down to the floor, and then I'm going to do some push-ups. So I'm bringing the arms forward, getting high up on the toes, heels are lifting, right? Getting good stability in the legs, getting really, really good mobility in the feet, which I think is highly, highly valuable. So again, the hands could be on the blocks, and you don't want to hear the knees falling to the floor, right, to protect your knees. Then untuck the toes and sit back on the heels. So if you can't do the pushing exercises that I'm going to do, you could hold plank. Another good thing you could do is have the hands beside you. And then I'm going to push through the feet and protract through the shoulders and lift, right? I'll do this a couple times just so that you have an option. So I'm bringing the knees down, relaxing the shoulders, then pushing through the hands and lifting through the hips. So it's like I'm pressing up into a handstand, right? And then bringing myself down. So shorter types of this stuff can be really valuable as opposed to just holding something really long and hoping that it'll help you, right? So short bursts of things, 5 seconds, 10 seconds is good, right? So push through the hands, lift up through the hips. So my hands are slightly turned out, my arms are straight, and then I'm gonna bring myself down. So straight arm strength is typically easier for a lot of people, but where you can get both bent arm strength and straight arm strength is using like push-ups. So I'm going to do some push-ups here, and then I'll do some alternative push-ups at the very end, which, will target a different area of your chest. So you can come forward onto your hands. I'm going to have my knees out on the floor. First one I'm going to do is an eccentric on my knees, which is viewed as like, it's easier, of course, but it can be very helpful. So I'm going to lower to the height of my elbows, and I'm going to hold for about 5 seconds. And then where you could really benefit is getting a little bit lower and holding, and then down. Now you might not have the strength to come up, but if you could push yourself straight up, back into the top of a push-up. So the front of my body is strong here, pushing through my fingertips, and then I could come down on my knees. Say that was really, really hard for you or difficult, you could do some stretching in between and then follow it up, say after a minute or 2 minutes. You don't have a lot of time. Cutting your rest in between your strength work is a great, great way to get really stronger, especially if you don't have a lot of strength. It'll be obviously very stimulating, and it'll get you that, because then you don't have to spend a lot of time on it, the shorter the resting time is, right? But I'm going to come back into the top of the push-up. I'm going to do some push-ups just with some eccentric. So I'm slowly lowering to 90. And then I'm going to slow that down and then come to, just above the floor. Now I'm going to press straight back up. So pressing up and then hollowing. And I'm just going to do one more, okay? So come down on your knees if you need to. Lower to the height of your elbows. Hold. Really push into the floor with the hands. Then lower. And then press straight back up. So hollow up the front of the body. Keep the weight forward. You could even be on the tops of the feet if you want to get stronger with this. And then come back down with the knees. And I'm going to just stretch out the hands a little bit more. Do some more hip stuff. And then we'll get into our first handstand, right? So have the hands turned back towards you. And just bend the elbows a bit. So peel the hands off the floor if you can. Bring the weight around in the hands just to stretch out the hands, the forms a bit differently for yourself. And then just come back. One more time, I'm going to sit back a little bit. So again, just see which hand you favor. Where you're flexible is where you'll typically lead. So again, I'm just moving the weight into the fingertips and then bringing it back and then turning the hands forward. So push back up into a down dog. And then in a down dog, you can pull back through the thighs, you can pull back through the hips, right? And then I'm gonna walk forward with my feet and then walking my hands back towards my feet. And I'm gonna slowly roll myself up to standing. So take the feet out nice and wide, and with the feet out wide, I'm gonna turn my feet out. I'm just moving the weight around into a horse stance. So horse stance is, if horse stance is a difficult position for you, it's a good starting point to eventually doing Cossack stretches, right? But like Cossack is a bigger range of motion, but the horse stance can be very good. So it doesn't have to be incredibly posterior, but when I'm in a posterior tilt, I feel a lot more stretching through the insides of my thighs, and that could be a point that's stopping you from getting into your Cossack, right? I'm going to take my arms out where my arms are up at the height of my shoulders and my thumbs are pointing up just so that you can see this a little bit more. And then I'm going to rotate my hands back, which is an external rotation. Now with all the end range of motion, what you could do is just use a little bit more effort. And then you'll start to see the shoulder getting stronger, but you'll also get more range of motion. So I'm going to turn the hands forward and down. And then as I turn it down and in, think that two people are pulling on your arms in opposition. Take your arms out in a wider, type of space, and then bring it back up. Now, if I'm holding a longer horse stance, you could always move the weight around because one leg will definitely be stronger, and you may be using one leg more than the other. So bring yourself back up. You can bring your arms down. Just turn the feet in. Just give yourself a little bit of a break or rest. Now I'm going to step the feet in. It's good to just work the feet out in transition. So taking the feet out wider again, repeat a horse stance or turn the feet out and just explore moving into a little bit of a range of motion. So when you're doing these Cossacks, you could lift the heel of the foot. Like it could be completely elevated. It's not bad if the upper body pitches forward. It's really a sign that the lower body isn't as flexible to get into these positions. So I'm gradually moving it slower for you today. So you can push the thighs out. And it's exactly how I do it. Some days it's very easy for me to get low, and some days it's not. So I'm never really concerned or worried if I can't get lower or if I don't get really low, to be honest. I'm using it more as, a way of keeping myself healthy and able. So I am lower. I'm going to reach for my right leg with my right hand just to add more of an emphasis on the right side. Often people focus more on the leg that's bent. So I want to get more into the interior of the right leg. I'm going to take it up and then I can go to the right. So a way that you could think of holding these positions is holding them, say 10 seconds. I think that's a good starting point, 10 seconds, because it's more progressive than, say, some other positions, especially within yoga. So take a couple deep breaths, and then bring yourself back up, and then just step the feet out a little bit wider, and then with this, a little bit more focus on the inner thighs, which will help you. We're going to do the Cossack one more time, just to get a little bit lower. But like I said, I'm spreading out the strength work so that I'm not burning you out and that maybe you can actually come up into a handstand today. So take the feet in a little bit closer if they're too wide apart. People measure, which is a good way. I do it more by feeling. So I'm going to turn my left foot out. I'm going to sit into my left leg. Now, if I want to get more into my hamstring, I'm going to turn my right foot up. And then I'm purposely trying to keep my upper body upright so there's more of a load into the hip. Now, you could sit technically as low as you can, but what I would do is sit like just about as low as you can so that you can relax a little bit, where it's not just you tearing yourself apart, right? Bring yourself up and then go to the right side. And as you go to the right, I'm sitting low. I'm going to elevate the heel, and you'll see very well which leg is more flexible for you in terms of the leg that is bending, but also to the hamstring. So I'm again pushing the legs apart, not sitting as low as I can. You know, the only time I really do that is if I'm just advertising something, to be honest. So push through the right foot and then bringing yourself up, and then just taking the feet back into just a neutral stance. Just kind of see the weight in the feet. So we're going to go into our first handstand, and that's where I think walking to the wall is, with the chest, is way more difficult. But look at it as, you might not get up all the way, you know, you might not get into as high as I do, but think of it as more building up strength. And it can be really frustrating this way because you're not getting the picture of it, but you're going to build up better intelligence in the body and strength and resilience, that when you're doing like kick-ups or those, I find those much easier to do. So this is a much kind of a grittier way of doing it, but I think it's better. So I'm going to bring my hands down. Now you're walking your feet up the wall. First one I'm going to do is kind of what I would do is if I had to bail out, if I had to come out, right? Because the reality is you might go up and you might get stuck. So you don't want to go up too high where you can't come out. That's the most important thing in my opinion. So when you come down, your hands are down. I'm going to turn my index fingers slightly. My hands appear to be out, but my index fingers are forward. They're just straight forward. So when I come down with my hands, I'm going to protract through the shoulders, and I'm going to take my leg up on the wall and then push to the hands. Now this might be all that you're doing, right? But I'm going to transfer the weight from hand to hand so that I can walk up. Now I'm not going all the way up. I'm here, right? Ribs are in. And then what I'm going to do is transfer the weight back into the left hand, back into the right, left and right, and then I'm coming down, and then I'm coming into a squat. Now again, if you're really kind of new to this, maybe that's all that you need. You know, you haven't had a lot of time on your hands. You want to slowly build it up. And then as you get more experience, you could do handstands throughout the day. You know, you could do a practice in the morning and afternoon, or afternoon and evening, something like that. Right? But when you walk up, you know, if I'm away from the wall, I'm not trying to get my chest to the wall at all. You know, if I'm getting my hands to the wall, which is about a fist away at first, you know, that's when your chest might get close to the wall, but you still want to keep it away from the wall, right? You don't want to collapse. So just for a couple of breaths, just be in an overhead position and try to hollow yourself out. So for those of you that walk close to the wall, you want your chest to be in, not extending out. Like we're not back bending. You know, it's more of a hollowed position. So again, when you walk up, really push through the hands. Like push like way more than you probably are. And you might burn out faster, but it's better, way better. Because you don't want to just sit in it. That's what people do. They'll like, I got to do it for 60 seconds, and they just hang out in it. And they really don't get stronger, you know. So push, right? Get stronger in it, then you walk out when you need to. So I'm going to walk my hands back again underneath the shoulders. I'm going to protract through the shoulders. I'm going to walk the feet up. I'm going to transfer the weight back. And then for me, I'm going to walk back a little bit further so that I'm back. And like I said, I'm a little closer I'm probably closer to the wall than you are. So I'm keeping my belly in, I'm keeping my ribs in, really pushing through the hands. And it's just good to, again, for the safety of it, is a great way. Like I said, you'll probably tire out faster. So push, just a couple more seconds, a few more seconds. And then shift the weight again into one foot or one hand, back out. And if you can, slow it down. Slow it down, and then you'll get stronger from coming out as opposed to just crashing out, right? So just come back onto the hands to stretch out the wrists. So bring the back of your right hand to the floor. So make a bit of a, like if you were picking up like a bowling ball, your hand's a little splayed. And then bring both hands back just to be a little bit more economical with your time. And then just move the weight in your left hand, bring it back into the right. And this is, probably the greatest counter, not the greatest, but in terms of this angle is what's really you're gonna be needing, especially if you're doing lots of yoga or calisthenics or handstands, right? You're gonna need more of this in terms of a counter. And then come back where your hands are underneath the shoulders, just to get the feeling. Press with the hands, round the shoulders out, right? And just this is the handstand. Eventually, this is what you're doing, but your legs are obviously over your shoulders. So lift back up into plank. As you come up into plank, push through the hands. Lift it back up into a down dog. Pedal it out. If you want it, just to be more efficient, I'm going to keep my arms straight. So come forward and through to an up dog. And then back up into a down dog. So pull it back, right? And then come down onto your knees. So a big part, especially if you're a male practitioner, is getting the line where you can get your arm in line with your shoulder and with your hip. So like for a male, it's usually it kind of looks something like this when they're handstanding. And for some women, but just getting over in an overhead position will greatly help you. I'm going to just make it more efficient, right? So I'm going to come down on the elbows to do that. And then I'm going to stretch the arms forward. And then I'm going to keep my head off the floor, but what I'm pushing down are my shoulders. And in yoga, not that it's incorrect, but often you'll just see someone just moving their chest down. It's really good if you're very inflexible in the spine, or just feels good, right? But I'm moving my shoulders down to the floor. So the further my knees are back, the more exposure I'll get into my chest and my shoulders. And then I'll come back. And then as I come back, again, I'm going to lift up into plank. So hollow yourself out. And then pull it back up into a down dog. Come into a forward bend. Stand your feet forward. And separate your feet. Be in a squat if you can. So not that this is primarily for the handstand, but for the squatting and the Cossack, get in the practice of squatting throughout the day. There's things that you could do like a squat practice, right? But you could also just do it as you're doing your, living your life. So I'm going to take my hands behind me and sit down, and I'm going to work more of just the pelvis has a lot to do with it. But the first thing I'll do is a hollow body. And your arms don't have to be overhead, but if you are getting stronger, it's a more difficult variation. That's how I'm going to do it. But certainly have your arms beside you, have your hands behind your head if you need it. But when I come back onto my back, I'm just going to come up into this very basic position, which isn't, flashiest thing in the world, of course, but it's a good thing to be working on. I'm going to take my feet over my knees. I'm going to take my arms overhead. And then I'm bringing my legs forward. And, if I'm working on keeping this line, it's very difficult. If you practice it more, obviously it gets easier. But it's a good pose to do. So if I wanted to hold it longer, but I can't hold it, I could take my arms forward when I need it. I could take my arms back, right? It's not like, it's not so black and white always. But take 3 deep breaths. Keep the belly, keep the ribs in. Extend through the arms. And then bring the knees back over the hips. Bring the head and the shoulders down. That was probably about 30 seconds. It's a good starting point. Say 10 seconds. Say 10 seconds is all that you could do. Have 5 or 10 sets. Build it up through sets rather than seconds. So I'm going to flip over onto my belly. And then when I flip over on my belly, I'm going to do it as far as the line of the handstand. So come forward on the abdomen, just so that my feet aren't in this camera. I'm gonna take my arms forward, and then just the starting point is having my head down, and I'm gonna pull my ribs away from the floor. So it might be hard for you to see, but when you were in boat, your lower back was in the floor. So now think that your lower back is touching the ceiling. So I'm keeping my ribs in. Really super basic thing to do. And then get your feet together, and then you'll feel your glutes engage. And this is ultimately, again, what you're doing when you're doing your handstand. So keep the ribs in, and then just let that relax. That's the easy version. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my arms forward and take my arms off the floor. So more difficult to do, but it assimilates a lot of your handstand. So take the arms forward, have the palms face in, and squeeze your glutes, bring your ribs in, and then take your arms off the floor. So just so that you can hear me, my head's up, you want your head down. So get your head down, keep your arms up, take 5 deep breaths, really lift up through the arms, lift the arms away from the floor. Keep the ribs from pushing into the floor so much. And then that'll help when you're overhead in your handstand. And then bringing your arms down. So take the hands underneath the shoulders. I'm going to come up into a low cobra. I'm going to come up into something higher just to counter, just to give your hips a bit of a break. But keep the ribs in. You could look up. You could look around. It's very rare that I keep my head in the same position when I'm back bending. So when I'm back bending, I'm really trying to find out what I need to adjust as opposed to just having the head neutral, as you'd see in every book, right? So the feet, could be more together. Then bring yourself forward, bring yourself down. Have your hands just underneath your shoulders. Push through the hands, lift straight up to a plank, and hollow out, really hollow out. I'm gonna breathe on the tops of my feet again. So push, 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 push. Keep the ribs in. And again, for those of you that aren't walking up, this is your handstand. It's building you up into getting into a handstand one day. And then come back down with the knees. Have the toes tucked and sit back onto the heels. So I'm gonna take my arms overhead. It's another great thing in terms of mobilizing the scapula. Is take the arms overhead, and as the arms are overhead, get your shoulders up to your ears. Especially even if you had wide shoulders, get your shoulders or your arms, the insides of your arms, to your ears or your head. Really lift up out of your scapula, keep your ribs in, and then just let that relax. So like hanging from molding or hanging from a bar can be really, really helpful in terms of correcting your alignment in terms of the handstand. I'm just gonna do that one more time. I'm gonna take the arms up, really lifting up through the arms, extending up through the arms, keeping the ribs in, and then bringing the arms back down. So again, if you could, lift the knees off the floor, take the arms forward, just come up a little bit off the heels of the feet, and then bring yourself up to standing all the way, bring your arms down. So then you could squat. I'm gonna do one more handstand just so you get a little bit more practice in that, but you could skip it. You could do side plank. Now, if side plank, you have a weak side, do the weak side, do the strong side, then do the weak side again. Because what you'll end up doing is you'll keep using your strong side until it may possibly get hurt. So you want to use the opposite side. So just to give you a little variety, I'm gonna kick up because maybe walking up is too difficult for you. Like I said, kicking up sometimes can be much easier. So when I bring my hands down, my hands aren't incredibly close to the wall. They're about, say about 3, maybe 4 inches away from the wall. Common mistake people do is that they lift the leg up and then so what you want to do is keep it down low and swing it up. So and I'm going to do this a couple times. So I'm pushing through the hands, and then I'm just going to lift through my right leg. So I'm going to lift and then lower. and lift, and lower, and lift, and really light, and lower back down. So you don't have to be perfect, you just have to practice it, you know, and you know, just get a rhythm of getting the leg up. And like I said, anybody can learn it, you just have to be smart about how you're approaching it. So I'm going to do the left side just so that I'm staying coordinated and I'm not always kicking up on the same side. So my hands are down, I'm pushing to the hands. Again, really, really get into the shoulders. And then you're taking your left leg up and down and up and down and up. Slowly coming down if you went up. But again, you could pick a number, maybe it's 2 that you're kicking up. I would set a timer if I was getting into some holds, and then you could get into like using those holds as terms of measuring out your sets. I'm gonna kick up one more time just for time. I'm gonna hold it for probably about 20 seconds, nothing too long, but something that can start you out. And you know, but again, you really wanna push. And don't get caught up in the time. When you need to come out, you come out, because then you could always do it again, right? So when I come, I'm going to kick up my left leg, I'm going to swing it up, and then as I bring it down and I kick it up, I want to keep the arms straight. And then when you're using a wall, you're going to be a little bit out of alignment. And that's okay, right? So I'm doing this more for the stability and the conditioning of your shoulders, not so much the alignment. The alignment, you know, when we did the chest to wall exercise, that's better. But I'm gonna bring my left leg down, nice and slow, and then I'm down, and I'm gonna be on my hands again, just to stretch out the wrist and the shoulders a little bit. So when you come down on the hands again, turn the hands out to the sides of your mat, if you're using a mat, and then move it side to side. And for those of you that are getting more comfortable on your hands, you know, I recommend getting away from your yoga mat. Like, start to do it on a good hardwood floor is a good place to start. But some of my, you know, when it's warm out, concrete is such a great surface to be on. And it's, you know, you get a smooth surface like a tennis court or basketball court. That's it's a great surface to do handstands. So turn the hands once again back towards the knees and just move the weight back a little bit, right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just isolate the hands. So I'm going to bend my left elbow and get myself a little bit lower. Lower is not necessarily better, but it's a fuller range, right? And I'm coming up. Just going to do that one more time on the left. And then back up. Again, do the hand that's, you know, more difficult for you. So at first, you know, just suss it out. See how much you should sit down into it. And then one more time, I'm going to come down. And then back. And then I'm going to end with a bit of a forward bend, a little bit of a twist. So take the legs forward into a seated forward bend and grab your big toes. Get your armpits together on top of your knees. Walk your hips back in space. Just for this type of practice, it's good to get on top of the legs. You know, I'm actively lifting my legs into my chest. So I'm not just using my back to come down. I'm using my legs to come forward. Probably easier to grab the heels than the tops of the feet. It's much more into the shoulders. And then just for a few seconds, bend the knees. And maybe that's better, right? Maybe it's, you know, especially if you're in a colder climate, you're not really warm. I didn't really spend any time forward bending in this class. So some people, it really takes a long time to work the straight line. But I will go back into getting the legs more straight. Now push the hands into the feet, but try to lift the legs into the chest. It's more of a sensation thing, right? And then you can hold the feet and do the same thing. So I'm lifting my legs. I'm imagining my legs are lifting up into my upper body. And then I'm going to release that. I'm going to bring my hands down. I'm going to do a counter for a tabletop. Very good for the shoulders. So have the hands underneath the shoulders. Have the knees bent. Lift the hips off the floor. And keep the hips up. Really get the hips up. Move the weight side to side. If I can, I'm going to move the weight forward, but I want to keep the hips up. And pay close attention to the sensation in your elbows. So if you come forward and your shoulders aren't flexible enough, your elbows will hurt. They'll definitely tell you not to come forward. So listen to that. But as I get forward more with my hips, manipulating more and more of my upper back, which is part of, connecting the dots in terms of getting your handstand. And then bring your hips down and wrap your arms around your legs. Push your knees out into your arms. The great thing about yoga is that you rest. I'm not teaching a relaxation today, especially because it's right around lunch, but it's obviously important to rest. So if you have the time, you could rest for a few minutes. If you have the time later, very good to do, depending on how strong your training is, your practice is really important to take the time to rest and so that you can practice again strong, whether it be tomorrow or the next day. So I hope this class was great for you. I love teaching it. I'm doing more online privates with people. That's something that I do through Zoom, and it's something that I've just I kind of saw a lot of people that I work with, they get to a certain place and whether it be injuries or wanting to get to a higher place in practice. So what I'm doing now is I'm writing out plans for people. So if you're someone that's, you have an injury, you want to overcome that injury, I have some basic plans for people for that. And then I also have plans in terms of like getting people into learning a handstand or, moving more diversely on the floor and in transitions. So let me know how the classes are going. Please share my work with people if it's helping you. It helps my cause, teaching people. Some people are taking my classes for free. Those of you that are donating, I really greatly appreciate the support. It helps me support those who cannot afford yoga. So have a beautiful weekend. I have a class tomorrow. It's 9 a.m. on Instagram and Facebook. And then I have a live class through Zoom, and that's at 10 a.m. on Zoom. You'd have to register for that class through my website. All my info's there. And I also have a training coming up in February. So if you're a therapist, a nurse, a psychiatrist, you could learn how to work with people more on a therapeutic level. And that's an online course. It's a 100-hour course. I also have it as there's parts of the course that you could take. You don't have to take the whole thing. So check out my website. It's through Prema Yoga Institute. So my friend Dana Slamp, the founder, I'm doing that training with her again. We've been doing it for the last 6 or 7 years, but because of the COVID, we're doing it now online. So maybe you could take that course if you're interested in becoming more of a yoga therapist. All right, take care, guys. Much love. Stay well, stay warm if you're in a cold climate.